Peace, blessings, and mercy of God be upon us all. I just want to share with us some information from this Good News Bible with Deuterocanonical Books and Apocrypha. I'm going to share with us three major things. So the first one is the sign of Emmanuel, where it says, and I read, "Well then, the Lord himself will give you a sign. A young woman who is pregnant will have a son and will name him Emmanuel. By the time he is old enough to make his own decisions, people will be drinking milk and eating honey. Even before that time comes, the lands of those two kings who terrify you will be deserted." This is from Isaiah 7 verse 14 to 16. And then an asterisk is put here, and we are told to check the footnote. In the footnote it reads, the Hebrew word here translated young woman is not a specific term for virgin, but refers to any young woman of marriageable age. The use of virgin in Matthew 1 verse 23 reflects a Greek translation of the Old Testament made some 500 years after Isaiah. So firstly, the authors of this Bible are telling us that the reason why they use the word young woman and not virgin as some other Bible translation use is because the Hebrew word that is used there is not a specific term for virgin, but refers to any young woman of marriageable age. And then they are telling us that the reason why Matthew used or saw Jesus Christ as a fulfillment of this prophecy that is mentioned in Isaiah 7 verse 14 is because Matthew was using a Greek text of the Old Testament, which was made some 500 years after Isaiah. So in an indirect way, diplomatically, they are telling us that Matthew made a mistake, that Matthew saw Jesus Christ as a fulfillment of this prophecy simply because he made use of a Greek Old Testament instead of a Hebrew Old Testament. And this copy that he made use of was made 500 years after Isaiah. And also some other commentaries I've read on, like the NIV thematic Bible study, will also say that this event that is mentioned here was actually fulfilled in the time of Isaiah, that King Ahaz was the one who was afraid, and therefore it was him who was being comforted with this prophecy, and that the prophecy was actually fulfilled in the next chapter. So you can read chapter 8 verse 3 to 10, when the wife of Isaiah actually became pregnant and actually gave birth. So that's what they will say. And there are some other commentators who tell us that yes, even though the historical fulfillment actually happened at the time of Isaiah, this passage also was a foreshadowing of Christ to come. So Christ was like a prototype, or was like a typology of this event that is mentioned here. So this is how they try to reconcile this. But all in all, they all acknowledge that the original word that is used here is a young woman of marriageable age, and that the book of Matthew, the author of Matthew, actually used a Greek translation of the Old Testament, which is made 500 years after Isaiah. I continue. The next one is on his Deuterocanonical books. From the introduction of the Deuterocanonical books, it says, and I read, precisely when Jewish leadership officially adopted the traditional 39 books of the so-called Hebrew canon is not known, nor is there agreement as to exactly what criteria were used in determining this canon. So he said, we don't know when the Jews actually adopted the 39 books of the Old Testament, and we have no idea about the criteria that were used. According to tradition, the Hebrew canon was fixed about AD 19, but there is evidence that official agreement on this issue came somewhat later. Okay, and then he continued, among Christians, it was apparently only in the 1st century that the issue of the canonicity of the books mentioned in the first paragraph arose. So what are those books mentioned in the first paragraph? The book of Tobit, Judith, Esther, Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach, Baruch, Letter of Jeremiah, Song of the Three Young Men, Susanna, Bel and the Dragon, First Maccabees, Second Maccabees. Okay, and he said all of these form part of the Septuagint Greek Testament, Septuagint Greek text, right? And then all Christians, some Christians were following it and some Christians were not following it in the early centuries, but it was only about the 4th century that the issue of their canonicity actually became prominent. The introduction continues. In 1546, at the Council of Trent, the Roman Catholic Church officially declared these books to be sacred and canonical. We are talking about the 16th century. In the 16th century, in the Council of Trent, the Roman Catholic finally declared that these books I just mentioned are actually canonical and they are actually sacred. And then the introduction continues. Martin Luther did not regard these books as scripture, but as useful and good for reading. And it says that Protestants generally continue this practice in their translation of the Bible in other languages. So just like Martin Luther, who did not consider this to be sacred and scripture, other Protestants continued this practice, since Martin Luther is like the father of Protestantism. And then we are told, lastly, that Roman Catholics speak of these books as Deuterocanonical, to indicate that their canonical status as scripture was settled later than that of the proto-canonical books. So for Catholics, they include all of these books in their Bible and they see it as scripture. However, they kind of name it a Deuterocanonical, which means that their canonicity was actually settled later than the previous books. So this is what we need to know about the Old Testament canon, and also what the Apocrypha, how the Apocrypha is viewed by both Catholics and Protestants. So for the Catholics, it is scripture, it is canonical. For the Protestant, it is not canonical, but it is simply good for reading. The last one I will show us is also from the Apocrypha version, where it talks about, in the book of 2nd Esdras, talks about the Messianic kingdom and the final judgment. What does it say? It talks about the return of the Messiah and what is going to happen. I read, "The time is coming when these signs will take place. The invisible city will appear, and the land that is now hidden will be seen. Everyone who survives the calamities I have predicted will also see the wonderful things I will do. My son, the Messiah, will be revealed together with those who come with him. He will bring 400 years of happiness to all the survivors. At the end of that time, my son, the Messiah, and all human beings will die." And this is the reason why I actually marked it with a pen. When I first read this so many years ago, I was actually surprised that a book in the Bible, which is regarded as canonical and sacred, as scripture by the Roman Catholics, actually contain this idea that the Messiah is going to come, and that after doing all what he needs to do, the Messiah is going to die. And this ties in with the Islamic belief, and this is the reason why it actually triggered my curiosity and my attention. So this is just the 3 things I want to share with us. You are welcome to make your own suggestions and your own comments in the comment section. Till next time.